It is my honor to introduce today's chapel speaker, Noble Brigham. In the past few years of being his advisor, Noble has taught me this important truth, that God's love is manifest in the bonds between teachers and students. We are not family, and we're not friends, though there might be echoes of those other kinds of relationships. The bond between a teacher and a student is its own strange and wonderful thing. In our ability to connect across our many differences, we model the potential inherent in humanity to choose love over hate, connection over discord. The bonds between teachers and students have spiritual power. I think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s idea of soul force. The bonds we forge strengthen our ability to fight injustice, apathy, ignorance, a whole range of things worth fighting. My attachment to Noble has evolved from many individual moments. I remember his recitation of Claude McKay's biting yet hopeful poem, America, in freshman English class. I remember talking about all our common loves, Victorian architecture, art, old books, various scandals. I remember laughing about the posts on the neighborhood listserv Nextdoor, which if you're not on Nextdoor, please get on Nextdoor. There was one about a runaway chicken that a neighbor thought was a mysterious jungle fowl. And I remember arguing with him too. He's pushed me to be better. That's what sometimes we forget. The people who push us most love us best. His wit, his intellectualism, his kindness, his complete willingness to be himself have all been blessings in my life. I'm eager to hear what Noble has to tell us about the sainthood of John Daniels. I know his talk will speak to our shared humanity and will build our soul force as a community. Please stand to greet Noble Brigham.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you to Father Gavin and the vestry for allowing me to speak today, and thank you, Dr. Nichols, for your wonderful introduction. This summer, I was faced with 7 crammed boxes, several books, and 159 taped interviews when I arrived in Austin, Texas on July 26th. Before coming to the archives of the Episcopal Church, located on the campus of the Seminary of the Southwest, I had been concerned that I might not have enough material to curate an exhibit about Jonathan Daniels, an Episcopal seminarian and civil rights worker with, but that was quickly replaced with the fear that I would never finish. Going through the files, recently acquired from Daniels' alma mater, Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which included letters from Daniels' voluminous correspondence and a number of documents from his education and legacy that were useful for the exhibit, took up the whole first week. Anyone who has done archival research knows how exhilarating and exasperating it can be. On one hand, you are discovering good material, but on the other, you are dealing with many duplicates, useless photocopies, and dead ends. Jonathan Daniels only lived to be 26, but his short life had a great impact. His story encompasses the civil rights movement and a young man, much like any of us, who was from an upper-class family and studious, but so passionate about what he believed that he died to save another activist. After Daniels was murdered, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "One of the most heroic Christian deeds of which I have heard in my entire ministry and career was performed by John Daniels." He may sound like someone remote and Christ-like, and while Daniels was an Episcopal seminarian and is today recognized as a martyr at Canterbury Cathedral, along with King, as well as in the calendar of lesser feasts and fasts on August 14, the day he was arrested, he was human. In March 1965, John Daniels and Judy Upham, 2 students at the Episcopal Theological School in Cambridge, left the comfort of their seminary to join Dr. King's Selma to Montgomery March, funded by the Episcopal Society for Cultural and Racial Unity, or ESCRU. Perhaps by fate, they missed their bus to get back and asked ETS to allow them to remain in Selma, where they would participate in activism but keep up with their coursework and return in time for exams. Their request was granted, and they spent the spring living in the Black community in a housing project and trying to integrate St. Paul's Episcopal in Selma. They were successful in part, and their interracial group was able to take communion and attend Easter services. But on his second trip, this time without Upham, after exams, Daniels grew disillusioned about prospects in Selma. In July, he traveled to Lowndes County, Alabama, nicknamed Bloody Lowndes, where 80% of the population was black, but not a single one could vote. Several organizations, including the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, and the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, were working to increase the rights of African Americans, mainly by helping them register to vote. The activists were met with a number of challenges in Lowndes. Local blacks were afraid to work with them for fear of retaliation from groups like the KKK and White Citizens Council. They were economically dependent on whites for land, employment, and food, which made it difficult for them to freely participate. Daniel's trips were also overshadowed by the KKK murders of white activist Viola Liuzzo in Lowndes, where she had helped to transport Selma to Montgomery marchers, an activity Daniels and Upham had been involved with, and the murder of James Reeb, a Unitarian minister working in Selma. After Liuzzo's death, bumper stickers reading "Open Season" appeared around town. Coincidentally, when Daniels first came to Selma in March, Reeb was on the same plane. Daniels was arrested on August 14 and put into Lowndes County Jail with 29 other protesters after leading a demonstration in Fort Deposit against local businesses that cheated blacks. He was released on August 20, but some in the group felt they had been set up because they were let out without warning and had no one to come get them. They decided to go to Varner's Cash Store for sodas and to use the payphone. But standing in the doorway was Sheriff's Deputy Tom Coleman, toting a 12-gauge shotgun. He told them in hate-filled language that they could not come in and threatened Ruby Sales, a 17-year-old activist, with his gun. Things escalated quickly, and as he pulled the trigger, Daniels pushed her to the ground and took the bullet for her. Richard Morrisroe, a Catholic priest, and others started to run, and Coleman shot him in the back. He would later claim self-defense at his farcical trial, where the judge, jury, and prosecutors were family friends or drinking buddies, saying Daniels and Morrisroe had come at him with a knife and gun that somehow disappeared. Daniels was 26. Coleman would live to be 86. While organizing this exhibit, I struggled with how to balance the horrific murder and resulting trial with all of Daniels' accomplishments. I did not want to focus too much on the murderer, thereby cheapening the narrative into true crime, or giving him the legacy he thought he would get when he shot Daniels. However, if Daniels had not been killed, he may not be recognized at all today. Still, few have heard of him because the Watts riot overshadowed press coverage, and then there was a newspaper strike during the trial, so he did not capture the public imagination the way Emmett Till's murder did. It is also important to remember that Jonathan Daniels was a person, like anyone else. In some articles and sermons, he is made out to be perfect, and it's true that he has gotten as close to sainthood as a layperson can. But he still had his uncertainties and problems. Going through his papers, I learned that he was rebellious as a teenager, and in the days before photo ID, even made a fake driver's license so he could buy alcohol underage. He struggled with doubt about his personal faith and sometimes crippling depression. He was unsure what he wanted to do with his life, wavering between medicine, teaching English, and being an Episcopal priest. But he knew he wanted to help people in some way. Ultimately, he realized the tremendous risk he was taking by working in a charged environment. And when it mattered, he laid down his life to save somebody else. In a paper he wrote that one of his seminary professors read at his funeral, he said, "I lost fear in the black belt when I began to know in my bones and sinews that I had truly been baptized into the Lord's death and resurrection, that in the only sense that really matters, I am already dead, and my life is hid with Christ in God." And that, sacrificing oneself for belief in God and sense of justice, is all that matters. In silence, let us reflect on what we have just heard.